you out for all the work that you do in our communities. And I also want to give thanks to each and every person that supports you and helps you do the work that you do, not just now, but in the future. And with that, I say a hope for my relations.
All right, thank you for that. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm really not used to using these, so bear with me. I'm used to using my big house voice. My traditional name is Gwen Godel. I'm at Gut. Gwen Godel. I'm at Gut. My English name is Herb Varley. You can call me that. I imagine it'll be easier for everybody here. Thank you for coming to our Renovicted forum. Basically, there's a lot of single room occupancies in this neighborhood that are being bought up and upscaled and marketed to students and young workers. And usually there isn't a problem with that, but this is the last kind of bastion of low-income rental units that are left in the city. So Vision Vancouver, who actually, if you can remember when they got elected, they promised to end street homelessness by the end of 2015. Instead, we've seen, since they've been in office, we've seen a 240% rise in homelessness numbers. So obviously, something isn't working. But we have our first speaker here, Blair Hewitt. He lives in Thornton Park, which was purchased by Stephen Lippman about 4 months ago. He can tell you all about that, and he's going to speak about living through a renoviction. Is everybody familiar with the term renoviction? No? Basically, it's when a landlord will, typically it's a new owner, sometimes it's existing owners, but basically they'll do a couple superficial renovations to a unit, like maybe slapping on a new coat of paint, maybe changing the doorknob, and maybe just slapping a new layer of linoleum down on the floor, and then they'll use that as justification to double or triple the rents, and basically push people out there who used to live, who could afford to live there. And like I said, these SROs, as crappy as many of them are, it's the only option other than the street. So this really isn't housing that we want, because we want people to live in self-contained units, but it's all we have. We're forced to fight for the precious little that we do have. And this is happening a lot, and since the city announced its local area planning process, it announced its plan for the neighborhood for the next 30 years about in March, and this renoviction process is accelerating. The first great historical displacement was of the Salish, Coast Salish people who occupied this land for at least 10,000 years, if not more. They were displaced in order to make way to basically build this city. And then the second great displacement that happened in this area was in what is now known as the Pell Street area. Historically, that was a Japanese-Canadian neighborhood. Japanese-Canadian-owned businesses, houses, apartments, and everything. And this isn't to say that if you walked in there that, you know, there was lanterns and Japanese-style signage. Actually, it was a very kind of typically Euro-Canadian town. You know, people wore coveralls and sold Coca-Cola and stuff like that, but it was Japanese-Canadian owned. And then World War II happened, and Canadian sentiment on Japanese-Canadian people soured, and these people were forced out of the area. The houses that they owned, the businesses that they owned, the whole neighborhood was sold for super, super cheap. Like crazy discount prices, and the city just took that money and just kept it. So that was the second great displacement in this area. The third great displacement happened in, you know where the viaduct is by the stadium? That used to be called Hogan's Alley. And it used to be a predominantly black neighborhood, black-owned houses, businesses, all that. And I can't remember, the 60s or the 70s? Someone might know the date better than me. 70s. In the 70s, the city council at the time had decided having a freeway system similar to LA would be great here for Vancouver. So they needed to start with one viaduct at least, and they looked at all the places they could have put a viaduct, and for some odd reason they chose to put it in the only predominantly black neighborhood in the city. And those people got displaced in the name of progression, I guess. And now that brings us to the current wave of displacement. The displacement that's going on now is largely income-based. And obviously, it's largely income-based, but Aboriginal, as DJ Larkin had alluded to, Aboriginal people are disproportionately represented in this displacement. We're disproportionately represented in low-income kind of jobs, or we're disproportionately represented in the low-income bracket of Canada, and in prisons and all that. But basically, we're going through another great wave of displacement right now. And I was talking about the Japanese Canadian people. Just 2 years ago, Canada, if Kathy Shimizu is here, she could tell you, but Canada apologized to the Japanese Canadian people a little while ago. Just 2 years ago, the city apologized for its actions and inactions in the displacement of those people, and had promised that it would never, never, ever sit idly by again while something like that had happened. Well, it's happening, and we need to call them on their bullshit. It's happening. So, yes, that's enough for a little bit of a history lesson. It's still so weird using one of these things. If you've been to one of the things I've co-chaired before, you'll know that I don't like using these microphones. I come from a big house culture. I like to use my big house voice. I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, we have another speaker, and then we're approaching the open dialogue session, so please just bear with us. But one of the things that the city tends to do when we ask for housing, when they either say we only have limited levers or limited powers that we can use to bring affordable housing into effect, but they also cry poverty. And I'm pretty certain everybody here has noticed these new Batmobiles that the cops are driving. If the city can afford to buy every cop in Vancouver a Batmobile, they should be able to afford to, kick in for some housing. I think in the past 8 years or so, someone can correct me, but the policing budget has gone up by about 20%, or several million dollars, and it goes up every year. And a police presence usually goes hand in hand with gentrification. Because there's going to be, anytime there's gentrification, you're going to have different groups of people kind of mixing together. You're going to have low-income people mixing together with high-income people. And this kind of weird, bizarre logic that the city has is, on the one hand, if I'm walking down the street with a guy who's wearing a nice business suit, got a $10 Starbucks coffee, and their bizarre logic, just seeing him will give me something to aspire to. And just seeing him will, somehow I'll learn magical money-making, I'll get some money-making prowess by osmosis, somehow. But also at the same time, since we've got high-income people mixed with low-income people, you know how low-income people are crazy and rowdy, and they're drug users, and they're criminals, and they're all that. So they also need to police the interactions. And that is why this police budget is going up. They need to protect these new homeowners, these new business owners, from people who can't afford to use their services, which is just bizarre. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for bearing with us.